So, Esther did well in school, obviously. She had already far exceeded what was required of her in her studies, but one area of expertise that she enjoyed very much was physical education. All of her friends, including her sister, were in the same PE class, which had ran the entire, or was going to run the entire semester. And hopefully they would do well in a cross-country race at the end of the semester. So they were all looking toned and losing a bit of weight, putting on muscle, and picking up speed on their running. So this is a little more than a month after she started her final semester. Ester and Dae were at their father's grocery store, Mr. Hull, and they were working, stocking the various groceries. It was a Saturday, and Mr. Hull said to him, well, they had done a fantastic job, as always, and he said before they leave, he'd like to go down the street to a Korean diner and have a meal. And Dae said, oh, that's just wonderful, because she knew that way her father would have a good meal for the evening. And so, while he was gone, Dae ran the register, and Esther did a little bit of straightening and whatever she could do. At that point, it was a good friend of Esther's came in, John Campbell, and he needed a job, and he asked if they were hiring, and they obviously weren't at the time, but they did have a questionnaire that he could fill out. And he said his two buddies needed jobs too. And so after visiting John and he left, Ester and Dae were talking about how the store could provide more job opportunities if the store expanded. There was a empty building extension of the building next door that the grocery store could expand into. And at that point, Mr. Ho returned from dinner, and he took off his jacket and was putting on his store apron, and he saw the girls were up to something. And so Esther first said, you know, Father, the store is doing well, and it's providing jobs for the community, and if we expanded the store into the empty room next door, maybe we could even hire more people and serve a greater part of the community. And Dae added that she thought that would be a really great idea, win-win for everybody. So Mr. Ho looked at the two girls and he said, I have considered this, but every time I go and look for financing, I'm turned down. And Esther spoke up, and she said to her dad, her father, that her birth father had left her a considerable large sum of money, and that she had placed it into the Chicago Commerce Bank, the CCB, and that she was confident that the loan agent there would approve any amount that he went in and asked for. That she was really certain of this. Mr. Ho thought for a minute and said, well, what is his name? And Esther said his name's James Thomas. And Mr. Ho said that he would go first thing on Monday and asked for a loan and see what happened. So Esther said that she could go with him. Monday, there was no school. And Mr. Ho said that would be really good. So at that point, the girls started to leave. As they left, they heard someone calling Esther's name, and it was a man just gotten out of his Escalade on the street, and he said, he was yelling, Ester Saint, can I talk to you? And he came rushing up. It was the gentleman in black that she had met once before on a limited basis that wanted to buy the stock that the Buhler not the Buhler brothers, but Otto Buhler had purchased quite some time ago. And she arranged for him to buy it at a premium. So he said, I have another favor task of your father. And Ester and Dae said, well, let's go inside where our father is. So they went in, and Mr. Wilson, he introduced himself, and he explained that he had large interest in the W.O.W, which is the World Organization of Wrestlers, and he would like to place a poster in the grocery store for exhibit. And Mr. Ho looked at his daughters, and he asked Esther what she thought, and Esther said, well, the W.O.W is extremely popular, and she was certain many of the customers enjoyed the wrestling, and so they could raffle off the poster. Many of the fans collect the posters. And they said, oh yes, she confirmed the W.O.W is very popular with many people. And so Mr. Ho agreed to putting the poster on the community board that he had on one wall. And so at that, Mr. Wilson thanked them very much and started to leave, but paused in front of Ester and said, I feel like we know each other very well, even though we haven't spoken much to each other. And he knew that Esther had been investigating him, and so he had also been investigating Esther. So he had hired some detectives to tell him as much as they could about Ester. So anyway, he said, I'd like to thank you for posting the poster and with these tickets for next Friday night. And he said, it's going to be a very memorable event, and you won't want to miss it. Ester said, will you be there? And Mr. Wilson said, oh yes, I wouldn't miss it for the world. And so with that, Mr. Wilson left, and Dae excitedly asked, how many tickets are there? And without counting, Ester said 10. She could tell by the feel and the thickness that it was 10, and she was correct. And they already, with enthusiasm, was looking at the tickets and said, oh my gosh, these are front row seats. This is so exciting. We can take all of our friends with us. So immediately Ester forgot the idea of raffling off the tickets to the store customers, and Dae was too enthusiastic. So at that, Dae and Ester once again said goodbye to their father, and that Dae was staying overnight at Ester's. So they left and got, let's see, I believe it was Ester had to ride her Ninja back to her apartment, and Dae was using the Mustang, Ester's Mustang. So they both went back to Ester's, and Dae had said to Ester that she was very hungry and she would really like to start supper immediately. Ester had expressed to her that she had planned on making pizza again because everybody enjoyed it so much before. And later in the evening, all of their friends would be there. Raven and Riley Grace and Eve, Helen, and Chris. So Dae said, well, as soon as you get home, please turn on the oven, which Ester did. And so once they were all there, they started making their pizza, and the doorbell kept ringing. This time, instead of looking through the peephole, Ester had her friend John add a few additional safety features, and there were cameras added, and there was a camera out front. And so at the side of the door, there was a viewing screen to see who's outside. She simply waved her hand in front of it, and for a few seconds it would show who's out front. And it was Raven and Riley Grace. So they came in, and they enthusiastically was telling him about the tickets for the W.O.W. event, and they too got excited. And they could tell that the oven was on and the house was beginning to smell like food, and Riley Grace was going to help Ester make the pizzas. And so they were working the dough and putting on the toppings, and then that was for 2 of the pizzas. And then Ester called over Dae and Raven said, "We're going to need more than 2 pizzas. Why don't you two make your pizzas and put the toppings on that you want?" And so they ended up with 4 pizzas in the oven. And once they were in the oven, all 4 stood there watching the pizzas for a while, waiting for them to cook. And of course, the apartment started to smell wonderful, like pizzas. And at about 10 minutes, they checked it. They looked done. They pulled them out, and Ester said, "We have to wait 6 minutes in order for them to complete cooking and to cool down a bit, because that cheese can really burn your mouth." So all 4 waited for the pizzas to cool, and then grabbed some pieces, went to the table, and started enjoying them. Ester had sodas in the refrigerator, which Ester always drinks water, and Dae decided that she would drink water, but Raven and Riley Grace, they both enjoyed Sprite. And so it was another evening of pizza. And they were waiting for Eve, Helen, and Chris to show up.